planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet, yeah. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. They acting like we from another planet. They say climate change ain't a thing. What you talking about? What you know about that? What's your carbon offset? Facts, we just wanna act, we ain't sitting back. Solar power, wind and solar power. Everybody need the energy to store it up and power the world. Recycle, we need more recycle. But you're acting like some followers on Instagram and Twitter, yeah. So tick tock, don't let the ball drop. The clock starts now, plug in, we gon' save the planet. So tick tock, don't let the ball drop. The clock starts now, plug in, we gon' save the planet. Tick tock, don't let the ball drop. The clock starts now, plug in, we gon' save the planet. So tick tock, don't let the ball drop. The clock starts now, plug in, we gon' save the planet. Save the planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet. Yeah. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet. We gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Save the planet, we gon' save the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. The ocean is alive, keep the plastic out. The ocean is alive, keep the plastic out. The ocean.
We all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. And then we all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. And then we all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. We all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall.
Hey, dog the sheep, roll the dice, put some money where your mouth is. Isn't it ironic how your love is so platonic? Plant a seed that grew into a flower and blossom in my heart, only to rip it apart. And then we all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. And then we all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. Yeah, you keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. Baby, this ain't a game of chance. Keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. Baby, this ain't a game of chance. Keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. Baby, this ain't a game of chance. Keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. Baby, this ain't a game of chance.
Do you love me? Do you love me now?
I'm not a player, I just crush a lot.
Do you love me? Do you love me now?
I'm not a player, I just ball out and lie.
Do you love me? Do you love me now?
I'm not a player, I just love a lie. And then we all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. And then we all fall like dominoes. It's coming, the bigger, the harder we fall. Yeah, you keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. But baby, this ain't a game of chance. You keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. But baby, this ain't a game of chance. You keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. But baby, this ain't a game of chance. You keep us gorgeous, you keep us gorgeous. But baby, this ain't a game of chance.
Let's do it.
All right, we're back. All right.
Probably like
Okay,
this.
that's better.
Oh. That better? What's up, man? I'm AY Young, founder of the Battery Tour, and I'm one of the 17 United Nations Young Leaders. So I obsessed over energy storage. I was like, I need to figure out how to power a full concert anywhere. I'm gonna do it myself, and that's how the Battery Tour formed. And I'm simply storing enough energy, renewable energy, to power a concert, right? And that's really what I'm doing. If you're looking, you see the outlet, which is what I'm using currently right now to power the tour and also send people around the world who lack access to energy.
Around the world. We realized that we could use these micro concerts to raise enough money to send portable solar-powered boxes to people who need them. The next box that we send out is going to Haiti, a place where people have to walk literally miles to charge their cell phone. Something that you and I take for granted, right? Just charging our phone. This is something that is literally changing people's entire life.
As I get older, I really understand the influence my parents had. I grew up, I used to, we had 4 crack houses on my block. And I watched my dad mobilize the inner city of Kansas City, the community. I would see Manuel Cleaver in my living room. I would see James B. Nutter or the Coffins. I would see these influential people in my living room working with my parents to change Kansas City and make it a better place. So I think a lot derived from my parents of community, of making a change block by block, city to city, and I kind of just took what my parents did and applied it using music as the vehicle.
I tell my story, I know you feel it.
I have powered over 800 concerts, using just renewable energy since 2012, right? And have helped get energy access through the outlets to over 17 countries, 18,000 nominations, 190-something countries. We're trying to pick 17 youth that are doing great things like that, right? To be a part of the Young Leader program. And I guess they picked me because I was achieving goal number 7, which is clean energy for everyone. I was getting people access to energy. And then I was achieving goal 13, which is climate action. So I was doing a concert powered by renewable energy.
So tick tock, don't let the ball drop. The clock starts now, plug in, baby. So tick tock, don't let the ball drop. The clock starts now.
I founded the Battery Show. It kind of starts with me. I got off this TV show called The X Factor. And I got 4 yeses from the celebrity judges, which is like L.A. Reid and Britney Spears was one of my mentors, Simon Cowell and Demi Lovato. I got out this show and I wanted to say hey to the world. I wanted people to hear my music.
Like I'm from another planet. Woo! Say the planet. We gon' say the planet. Everybody looking at me like I'm from another planet. Ooh. Say the planet. We gon' say the planet.
I'm powering my entire concert with renewable energy. So that means that not only is it possible, but maybe people could start doing it more. So whether you care about the grid or you don't believe in this or that, one thing that we do know is we can power a concert by renewable energy. So why not do it, right? One thing that we do know is that people may need access to food or clean water or clean energy, which is one of the SDGs, right? So let's do that. And so what I'm here to do is just show what's possible, right? I mean, I think that it could be crazy if every artist in the world adopted what the Battery Tour is doing and power all their concerts from now on with renewable energy. I mean, that might be good for the planet, right? So why not do it? What's stopping you?
I'm ready for a change. Gonna change my ways.
I look forward to 2 years from now. We've achieved it, right? We have done the album, we have done the tour, and we have released the guidebook and the roadmap to all artists in the world, saying, "Hey guys, this is how you tour sustainably. This is how you make a sustainable album, right? And here are the people that advance these goals and do these things."
Hey everyone, I'm Dan English. I'm your host. I'm your friend. These are my co-hosts. That's me. That's Zeus, and over there, that's Jenny Bratbird, PhD, working with the Most Policy Initiative. Jenny is a fellow, a legislative fellow for us. Jenny, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing, Dan?
Pretty good, pretty good. As I said, this is our climate change roundtable event. That was the world premiere of my short documentary about Kansas City-based hip hop artist A.Y. Young, whose passion is changing the world and raising awareness about renewable energy and climate change. He's supposed to join us today. He may be having some technical difficulties. We'll get him on when he comes on. But in no particular order, I want to introduce some of the people joining us today, at it from left to right on my screen, I guess. Beth Martin, how are you doing today? Beth Martin from Washington University in St. Louis.
Hi, good to see you. And I've got two co-speakers behind me on my bed. So if you hear a bark,
Sounds good.
Hopefully they won't encourage your co-hosts.
All right.
Good to be
We're
here.
gonna. Good. Thanks. Let's say hi to Dr. Fenpeng Song from the University of Missouri in Kansas City. Dr. Sun, you are a climate modeler, and you've got a big new study coming out about mapping the urban heat island effect.
Yeah. Hey, Dan. Hey, Johnny. Nice to meet you guys. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I don't have a co-host right now with me, but I have my son, my daughter upstairs. They might make some noises. Apologize for that.
All right. Let's say hi to Dr. Pat Ginnan from the University of Missouri. Dr. Ginnan, how are you doing today?
Hi, Dan. I'm great. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the visit.
Yeah, me too. And last but not least, Doug Cluck from NOAA Climate in Kansas City. How are you doing, Doug?
I'm doing great. And hi, Pat, and hi Feng Peng. I know you both.
All right, I'll go ahead and just add everybody into the chat. Jenny, do you want to start us off with our first topic of discussion?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so we thought we would start off with what's been in the news lately, which is related to climate, is weather. So the power outages that we've kind of been happening in Texas and a bit in Missouri, as well as many other parts of the country. We're seeing that utilities not keeping up with demand for electricity. And so I'm especially interested in your guys' thoughts and opinions about, the extreme variability in weather and how that relates to what we're seeing with overall climate trends and the trade-offs for energy sources in terms of cost and environmental impact and reliability.
Sorry, I could start maybe, and we can go around the table, or
yeah, whoever wants to start first. I'll start off, and let's Pat and Doug. I think you guys are the best ones to answer this. We know that the polar vortex has a lot to do with the recent cold snap that we just had. Some climate scientists are saying that climate change is increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has an effect on the polar vortex and its variability. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Pat. You go first.
Okay, we'll tag team, Doug. Well, the Earth is warming, but there are different parts of the Earth that are warming faster than others, and the Arctic is one of those. And the polar vortex is this swirling mass of cold air in the Arctic region that's usually confined by the polar jet. And with this warming that we're seeing in the Arctic, there's a tendency for that jet to weaken. And then that jet stream can become a little bit more amplitudinal. In other words, a little bit more wavy, like a roller coaster. And you get these lobes of that Arctic air, like what we saw earlier this month, diving down into the central United States, bringing these really cold temperatures. So the weakening polar jet makes the more opportunities, perhaps like what we just saw, of this cold air digging deep down into South Texas and bringing a lot of impacts with that cold air outbreak.
Yeah, so just in short, that's what Pat is describing is still more or less theory and something we're trying to figure out if that is indeed a cause for some of these cold and hot events, actually long-lasting hot, dry, and or wet, or continuously wet, kind of like what we saw last year, the year before last, 2019, and in fact 2018, across the middle part of the U.S. in terms of being extremely wet. In fact, back-to-back record-breaking years in terms of wetness, which was very, very odd for us as well. So let me just say from my point of view that the jury is still out in terms of trying to determine if it is, if in fact it's natural variability which is causing these waves to behave oddly or not. What I will say about the polar vortex is, let's also look at winter as a whole and how warm it was preceding that. Okay, so from October we actually had a cold spell. From November through January, it's the warmest it had been in North and South Dakota ever, and in our recorded history, 126 years worth. All right, and all the states around it were in the top 10 in terms of warmest 3-month period. So our winter up till then was a cakewalk, believe it or not. Then it got cold. Then we had one of our Arctic outbreaks, and they are normal from about here north, here being Kansas City, but to the south of us is what really was the difference maker. And I think we need to do some research in terms of determining, attributing, if you will, why that happened.
All right, good responses, Jenny.
All right, so can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Sun.
Yeah, I just like chime in just a little bit. Doug talk about climate. We are talking about the weather activity versus climate change. And nowadays, it looks to me, whenever we have a natural disaster, people say, "Oh, that's global warming." Now it's not really that fair. To be honest, in the research community, we still have some uncertainty to understand what's going on about climate change, the kind of long-term change trend with the natural variability. It's really hard ongoing topics. So we don't have a clear-cut answer to those type of questions. To the people, for example, you mentioned that people living in Texas. I think one of the most important thing, we need to be resilient. We need to be prepared, not only for the people but also probably for the climate scientists. We also need to improve our understanding of these topics, and hopefully we will be able to convey the knowledge to the general public to let them be prepared for the future disasters like this event.
I just want to say that the surest way to get likes on Facebook is to have dogs, because we're getting lots of thumbs up on Facebook right now. I just want to remind everybody, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, there's a comment section below the video. Type your questions in that comment section. From the time we talk to the time you hear our voice is probably 30 seconds. So maybe we'll get to your questions. But Jenny, moving on to the environment.
Environment or energy?
Oh, the all right.
Well, I guess to follow up on Dr. Sun's comment there of there's a lot we don't know. So I'm wondering if we could take a step back and talk about what we do know about climate change, perhaps in relation to increasing greenhouse emissions. Just sort of break it down. What do we know here with these rising temperatures? Might be a good question for Pat if I'm going to call someone out.
Right. Okay. Well, sure. Well, greenhouse gases, they trap heat in the atmosphere and they warm our planet. And they occur naturally, but also humans contribute. And carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, and by humans, that they occur naturally, but humans also contribute these mainly through the burning of fossil fuels. And say, for example, for transportation and for electricity generation, that makes up those two combined make up nearly about 60% of the fossil fuel contribution. So obviously, when you pour more of those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, like CO2, I believe is up to 415 parts per million. That's a 40% increase during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That's going to heat our planet, and that's what we're seeing.
So I think, Jenny, I'll just jump in. I'm not sure if you were going this direction, but I'm going to take us that way anyway. But I think just like Pat referred to, is understanding where emissions are coming from, what's causing emissions. That's really important information. Well, and I will also add, how they model and how then they work within the atmosphere. That's also critical information, as then we start to think about, well, what do we do about that? And what types of policies do we put in place? Where's the most effective areas to put our resources to mitigate, to mitigate, or rather, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions.
We're getting some questions coming in on Facebook, and maybe Beth, you are an engineer. None of us are experts on the electric grid or anything like that. Penny, let me click the mouse. But maybe we can all take a shot at fielding this question from Janet Roger Bergman. There has been a lot of attention to failing windmills in Texas. Is there a difference between windmills in Texas and those freezing and those in the north? Why don't we hear of windmills in Canada freezing?
So, well, like you said, no, this is not my area of expertise, but I think that the issue really is, how are those windmills then, when they're installed and placed and maintained, are they winterized? And are they prepared for the conditions that they need to live in, for lack of a better word, right? The windmill needs to live in a certain place in a certain time, and has it been winterized appropriately? And I think that that's going to be the main difference for what you see in windmills that are installed in other locations versus Texas.
Right. And I'm not an expert on windmills or anything, but last time I was in Northwest Iowa visiting family, it was 30 degrees below zero, and they have tons of windmills up there that seem to work just fine. Jenny, do you want to take us to the next section of our talk here?
I'll say about windmills, they've gotten a negative rap, I think, because people sometimes want to find things wrong with them, but there were failures in the nuclear and natural gas sector too. So resilience is an important topic for all of our energy sources.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that really is a conversation, right? And it's a policy and decision-making conversation for those who run the, well, in Texas works on its own grid, but for those who run the grids, in terms of how do you reinforce, right? How do you reinforce your system? Where do you put your, where do you install contingencies? Where do you winterize? What do you put money into? And what do you prepare for? And understanding what are those conditions under which you need to be prepared to effectively operate. Those are important policy decisions that I think the policymakers in Texas have grappled with before, and I think will most certainly be grappling with again now.
Definitely. I think a lot of people are going to be grappling with those questions and policy decisions. So maybe turning towards Missouri, we can think about if some of our more local experts want to talk about extreme weather events that happen here in the Midwest. Sometimes we hear that climate change is to blame for some of the tornadoes and floods we're seeing. Do we know what kind of changes in weather patterns we're likely to see as the climate changes?
All right, Pat, I'll start. You finish, or Feng Peng. From a severe weather point of view, I hate to say the same thing over and over again, but it's difficult to discern whether there are necessarily more tornadoes or more bigger hail or more hail or that kind of thing, or even straight line winds for that matter. However, we do know that with a warmer climate, there's the availability of water or water vapor, saturation water vapor, whatever you want to call it, in the air. More water in the air is definitely possible, simply because the warmer air is, the more water it holds, almost exponentially. So that means when you go from 30 to 60 degrees, yeah, I don't know the percent. I don't know off the top of my head. I should probably figure this out. But it's a very quick increase in the amount of water that the air can hold. And thus, when you have something to wring it out, like a cold front, or even a hurricane, if you're down south, the availability of water is greater. Thus, when you wring it out, more water falls out. Okay, so what we have seen are more frequent heavy rainfall events, thus more flash flooding type events. We've also seen more major river events, if you will, and that is to do with just wetter seasons or wetter years as a whole. And that there's definitely an increase. I don't know which way I should go with this. A trend towards wetter conditions, especially north of here too, in the upper Midwest and northern plains, south into Missouri for sure, and probably even all the way down to the Gulf Coast for that matter. So from a water availability point of view, or let's say heavy rainfall event point of view, we've seen more of that. And I'll turn it over to Pat to finish off maybe some of the drought discussions, because he's dealt with a lot of drought lately too in the last few years.
Oh yeah, the irony of too little or too much extreme events. Yeah, I'll speak for Missouri. When we look at the trends, the weather trends over the past few decades, the two things that stick out for me, temperature and precip wise, is that we're getting warmer and we're getting wetter. And Doug talked about the precipitation aspect, about more flooding, more extreme events. And, the data doesn't lie. We have a really nice, solid record of temperature and precipitation records that go back over 100 years. And when you look at the numbers and you plot them and chart them, you see that upward increase in precipitation. And that translates to, 4 out of our top 5 wettest years on record have occurred since the early 1970s. And when you look at particular precipitation events, for example, 3-inch events, if you look at all the 3-inch events and accumulate them over 120 years, since the 1950s, you see a steady increase in those 3-inch events. In fact, over the past 20 to 30 years, we've seen about a 35% increase in 3-inch events. And the same would be, upward trends in 1-inch events and 2-inch events. And this all translates to more flooding that we're seeing not only across Missouri, but around surrounding states as well, the Midwest for that matter, the northeastern U.S. For temperature, we're also warming. The rate of warming is not identical across regions of the country or the world, but we're all going in the same direction. We're warming. And our warming has been ongoing in Missouri since about the late 1990s. We've only had 5 years since 1998 that were cooler than normal. So what is that? Almost 80% over the past couple of decades, more than that, of those years have been above normal. And seasonally, if you break it down, it's our winters and our springs that we're seeing most of that warming that's been happening. Summers, believe it or not, have been somewhat benign. Records will show you what it was like in the 1930s and the 1950s. We had triple-digit heat on the summer of 1936, 50 days, 60 days of triple-digit heat. Well, we haven't had 100-degree temperature in some locations for 8 years. And that's for precipitation and what Doug talked about, dew point. That's the temperature at which the air becomes saturated. Our dew points have been going up with increasing precipitation, with efficient evapotranspiration that occurs during the growing season. That actually suppresses maximum temperatures, and that's why our summer heat hasn't been out of control. At the same time, it's the minimum temperatures. If you break it down, max temperature versus min temperature, most of our warming over the past few decades has occurred on the minimum temperature side. In all 4 seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall, that's where most of the warming is occurring with minimum temperatures. So it's warmer and wetter. That's what we've been seeing in Missouri and for the Midwest for that matter.
I want to take a beat here and introduce someone who brings the energy literally and figuratively. Kansas City-based artist A.Y. Young, who's just joining us now after some technical difficulties. A.Y., how are you doing today? Oh, hey, your mic is off. Hold on, I got you. There you go. Now you're. Yes, unmute his mic. Okay, I can't unmute your mic.
I think
There
I
you
did.
go.
I got it. What's up, guys? How you doing?
A.Y., how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm crazy busy.
Yeah. Good. We just got done watching our little 5-minute, I don't know what the video, I'm calling it a documentary now about how you promote sustainable energy and try to get people on board with clean energy, that kind of thing. And I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit with you. You know, a lot of your work helps to raise awareness on pollution and energy and consumption. What kind of impact are your efforts having not only on concert goers but on like other artists as we try to, you know, reduce our carbon footprint?
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing like a great global impact. You know, like after obviously becoming, being appointed one of the 17 young leaders.
I think AY's having some. Yeah,
Am
there
I
we go.
on?
I hear you again.
Yeah,
you're
there's
good.
calls. I'm getting calls nonstop, so I put it on Do Not Disturb. I hope that works. Sorry, guys, like my phone's off the hook. But like, dude, to answer your question, after being appointed as one of the 17 young leaders and getting this platform from the United Nations, you know, the artist community is responding strongly. I mean, we're coming out of COVID, right? Or trying to. Venues are shut down. You know, it's like almost inspiring people. Like, hey, wow, I have an outlet. There's a way, a different way I can do it. Right, that not only is good for the world, but can get my passion out. And like that's what the Battery Tour is really about in general. Kind of why I created this thing that can really, make impact as well as like provide some changes of how we do things. Right?
Yeah. Hey, let's open up to a topic about energy for everyone. Feel free to chime in. What are some of the policies that we might need to be aware of that really impact our energy use and the sources of energy we use from?
You're opening this up to the people right now?
For anybody.
Yeah. I mean, the Paris Agreement is wonderful. Like,
right.
I was blessed to be in the event with the Secretary General of the UN, John Kerry, and Richard Curtis, and so many others just last week, and we were just celebrating it. You know, the progress now with that, and I think that's going to be pivotal. And I think it's all about us all working together. You know, as a world of people, as humans, to really make this happen.
So
it's really interesting that you brought up the Paris Accords, because Beth and I were just having a conversation about that, Beth.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad you brought that up. I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting is with the U.S. re-entering into the Paris Agreement, we're now at the point where we're going to have to create what's called our new nationally determined contributions. And it's essentially, the U.S. saying, here's what our mitigation goals are, and here's how we're going to meet them. And the Obama administration had done that. And part of the Paris Agreement is that every 5 years, countries put forth new commitments and new ways in which they'll meet those. And the idea is that every 5 years, you have this ratcheting mechanism that hopefully gets us closer and closer to the goal of 1.5 degrees of warming. So, the Biden administration is pulling together. The U.S. has updated NDC that they have announced that will go into, that they will put forward, I think, at the summit that they're hosting at the end of April. What I'm really hopeful for is that one of the things that we saw within the plans that Obama put forth is the NDC really looked at what were national level goals and what could be achieved on a national level, and really what could be achieved either under existing regulations or within what was underneath Obama's executive authority. And I think one of the things that came out of the Trump administration's withdrawal was kind of a silver lining if you wouldn't want to call it that. But it was this kind of kick in the butt for local and subnational that always knew that there was really important work that needed to be done in the cities and the states and the regions. And at that point, in the absence of federal leadership of, wow, we really need to get on. And so I'm hopeful that as we continue to move forward, we'll have federal leadership and federal action, but also it doesn't do away with all of the work that we need and can be doing on the local level, whether it's, with the city of St. Louis recently working on a building emission standard and how, because buildings are one of the largest contributors or a significant emissions contributor, and how do we make our buildings more efficient? And so that's a local example that some of my colleagues at WashU have been working with the city of St. Louis on. So everything from really what we can do on a city level to a state level, in addition to whatever the Biden administration puts forth at the end of April.
Yeah. Let me hop in here because I think this is a question from YouTube from Zach Miller that kind of piggybacks on this. Let me put it up on the screen. Can you speak to the importance of landscape design and mitigating the impact of extreme rainfall events in Missouri? This is an engineering question as well as a weather question for climate change. Does anybody want to comment on this?
Well, I often kind of joke with my students that when I was in engineering school that I learned how to design culverts and pipes. And that's not all they learn how to design now in engineering school, and thinking about how do you design stormwater systems and how do you look at natural examples and design a stormwater system that helps keep the water in place rather than kind of place it on the stormwater superhighway and get it to the river as quickly as possible, right? That it's really important to start to think about designing systems where we keep the water in place, that we can allow the water to infiltrate as much as possible. And obviously the systems will always have overflow, so if to prevent flooding, right? So that excess water will kind of flow into your stormwater system. But I think that's a good question because I think it really is important when you try to capture your water in place. It decreases your flushiness and the flashiness of your local streams, and it helps support the local water system right there.
So there's several aspects to this. I think you're talking urban mostly, Beth. Right?
Yeah, yes, I was definitely thinking of within an urban system for sure.
Yeah, and that's, I don't have a lot of expertise either way, but I'm going to say Pat does in terms of soil health and that whole initiative from the national NRCS, part of the USDA. Pat, do you want to speak to that? I'm assuming you can.
Right, I do. Yeah, in agriculture, there's been a lot more talk and action when it comes to cover crops. They've really taken off over the past few years to help mitigate the impacts of these extreme precipitation events that leads to more erosion, soil erosion. And so planting cover crops helps to trap carbon and then at the same time put nutrients into the soil and mitigate the effects of these extreme events that are having big impacts on agriculture.
All right, Jenny, before I let you get to the next question, I just want to remind everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube that you've got a question, put it into the comments down below and we'll get to them. Jody Jackson Jr. has a great question, but we have a topic about that coming up, so I'm saving it. Keep watching, Jody. We'll get to you.
Okay, well, for the next question, we've been talking a bit about different policies that could be in place at different levels, whether that's international, or at federal level, at the state level, even more local. And, from what we know historically, especially thinking about this at the end of Black History Month, is that there are certain communities that are going to be more at risk with climate change. We think about urban heat islands or with flooding damage. So how do we think about this problem and implement policies that are going to help the people who are most vulnerable and, really lift everyone up with adapting to climate change? So that's open to anyone.
Well, I think a lot of it is sharing of information that hasn't been done in the past. And there are various reasons for that. I guess I'm speaking from my own personal point of view as opposed to NOAA, but I think that's okay. I've worked with a number of indigenous tribes across the Missouri Basin, not necessarily in Missouri, right, on building capacity in terms of their understanding and our understanding of what they understand in terms of climate and climate change. So in their particular instance, there's a lot of information that they've passed down for centuries, literally centuries, right? That we're very unfamiliar with, especially as a Western scientist. Okay, that's an example. Now, I'm not really getting to the urban part here. I hope someone else will speak to that. But in terms of that particular community, they have a lot to teach us, but they also want to be able to make decisions for themselves in a, if you will, scientific engineering point of view as well. So there has to be a lot of sharing of information.
Hey, AY, I want to piggyback on that. Speaking of this as Black History Month, and we try to look at everything through an equity lens, and just to follow up on that, in the video package, you talked a little about growing up and your parents inspired you to change things city by city, block by block. Can you talk about why it's so important to help strengthen and lift up vulnerable communities?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, empowering people is a must, right? And every facet of the word, if that makes sense. And I mean, so many impoverished people, even developing nations, when it comes to like pushing forward these sustainable initiatives, they're lacking education. Some of them are lacking energy to even educate themselves in a new way of the world. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely important because we can't do this unless we are together in it. I think it's kind of like the virus, right? It's like how are we going to defeat the virus if half of us are doing concerts with 10,000 people and dancing at the club, and the other half is locked in their house? It's not going to work. And I talk about how the world is tackling issues in silos, even the UN, which is why I'm making such a crazy movement within the UN, because they're working on the sustainable development goals, or doing all these great things in silos, and you got to find a way to bring it together. So I talk about this all the time, that I think the world, humans, companies, artists, individuals, I see them as outlets, and if you can plug them into the battery to power the change, then you can really make something happen, right? So yeah, again, it's important to empower people to be that battery, right, to power change. And if they're not empowered enough to do it, how the heck are they going to do it, bro? It's not going to happen. We will fail.
So I think it's also really important to think about representation and decision making too, as we're thinking about policies that need to be developed, policies that need to be put in place, really thinking about how do we incorporate the community, both in answering the questions of what the challenge is and what potential solutions might be. And I think that's really critical as you try to build a resilient and equitable response to climate change.
Yeah, I agree with Beth. For this is not only a climate issue. We talk about climate change. People always said, okay, we want to save the mother planet Earth. But to be honest, it is true. But to be honest, the ultimate goal, I think, we should need to protect human beings, us. So we want to avoid those kind of negative impacts of humans and make sure, we're going to have a better or sustainable future for us, not really for the Earth, actually for the human beings. So we need to understand, the physics behind the change, and also we want to do some kind of impact assessment about climate change. Here at UMKC, have the pleasure to working with, the other scientists from the other field, and we're trying to integrate the climate data set with the public available, demographic and socioeconomic information, and we can further leverage the climate change research to explore the impact stuff. And for example, we want to see the excessive urban heat and the social vulnerability and disparity. And this will better understand the need of local communities, which we face in the most impact on the ongoing climate change and also future climate change. We, for example, here, my group has developed some high resolution climate modeling data set. We are able to incorporate this data set with some public available census tract data set. For example, we are looking at the connection between the urban heats with, for example, the income level around Kansas City metro area. We definitely find something interesting. I'm sure people heard about the truth. It used to be a dividend line between this kind of historical perspective. But right now, people argue that more and more research are trying to showing that the climate change might impact the people inadequately, just differently. So, and also especially for the low income population, they tend to have less resources to reduce their exposure to the urban heat, but spend more time outdoors. So, from us, we found out a very good spatial correlation between the urban heat in the Kansas City metro area from our simulation. And also we are trying to set up that linkage to the socioeconomic, status of people. This is also a type of interdisciplinary research. By incorporating different fields, we are able to looking at this disparity in terms of climate change. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on this.
Well, there was a study that came out, I want to say that it was last spring, right, that looked at these urban areas and looked at the areas that the hottest parts of their urban areas and correlated it with previous housing policies and redlining policies, and finding that, some of our historical policy decisions are negatively combined with a warming climate, are now negatively impacting lower income or communities of color. And so it's a combination of kind of current climate information with historic knowledge of structural racism and structural policies. And those are combining. And so we need to be aware of that and think about that as we're starting to develop solutions moving forward. And that was present in cities across the US.
We have about 20 minutes left. So Jenny, if you don't mind, I think we should move on to our next our next topic, which kind of piggybacks on what we were just talking about. It's kind of like climate change is a lot of bad news, right? But this is kind of the good news. This is how we can fight climate change. This is how we can, make some great new high-paying jobs, and some of those great new high-paying new jobs can actually help and lift up vulnerable communities. Beth, I have a question specifically for you. There are a lot of challenges facing us when it comes to climate change, but mitigating climate change may be a huge opportunity for jobs in the economy. What are some of the messages you and your colleagues are sharing about the huge potential for high-paying jobs at Washington University?
So I'd like to start, though, with saying that I think it's really important to recognize and identify the need for high-paying jobs, but also the need for jobs across all income sectors. And so I think that's important to think about. A term that you'll hear both internationally, nationally, and locally is just transition. So this is a concept by which you're acknowledging that as our economy is transitioning, people are going to lose jobs. There are going to be people in places where, as the economy transitions, that their job may not fit anymore, their job may not be available. And it's really important to recognize and honor that there is a loss there, and think about how do you identify what jobs might be available, but then what tools do we need to help provide the workforce development and workforce training in order to both, just celebrate that there's some really cool new jobs in the renewable energy sector. And that's awesome, particularly for like our students now who are in college, but there's also some really cool opportunities, even at the same time that people are truly experiencing a loss at the same time. And so I think that that's a challenging question, but those are the things that we try to keep in mind as we have conversations around this.
All right, Dr. Sun.
Let somebody else chip in.
Yeah, go ahead. I was getting to Dr. Sun. I want to hear more about your heat island island study. A lot of people were telling me that you were doing this, and they were wondering how are you do it. Are we doing it with remote sensing from like satellites, or do you have a thermometer out the window of your car as you're driving around? How are you figuring this out?
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for mentioning that. Yes, I claim myself as a climate model. I use climate models. Use lots of numerical simulations. For example, here at the UMPC, my group has been doing some high-resolution regional climate models. We are trying to reconstruct what happened in the past, what is going on, but most importantly, we want to know what we want to predict, what will be happening in the future. Nobody lives in the future. I don't have any crystal balls I can share with you, but we can only rely on those kind of so-called numerical simulations to tell us what's going on, what might be happening in the future. And for example, and also based on the model simulations, we are able to find out some, let's say, some kind of so-called hotspots in the city. For Kansas City, metro area as a good example, typically in the summertime, usually, the average temperature in the urban core area might be about 4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit than the rural area. Our study even showed that sometimes in the day, actually, that temperature difference could be as large as more than 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The model gave us something that we cannot really retrieve from the observations. The observations are still excellent. However, the coverage is very, coverage is small. It's a sparse data set. We do have, some kind of, weather station network. For example, I know, Pat, you are managing the massive net across the Missouri. And I don't know how many, probably 40 or 50 of them. But still, that's not good enough to cover, the whole Missouri area. That's something good, for the modeling stuff. That's the reason, I like modeling stuff. And also, there's something, I can talk about. The models, we can do whatever we want. For example, if we don't like, for example, the Union Station or Kaufman Center, okay, in our model, we just wipe it out. We're going to see if we wipe them out, okay, what might be changed in our, the local weather and the climate. So this is something that I think is pretty cool in terms of my research. And also, I'm trying to, build up the, this modeling stuff techniques with some observational measurements, and hopefully we're going to get a sense of integrating the both modeling and observation to give us more understanding about the urban heat stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering about, because you and I talked a little bit about cool roofs. Is that what you're talking about when you're saying wipe them out? Are you talking about cool roofs?
Oh yeah, they are relevant. This is some kind of technique you can only do in the models. For example, we are trying to argue, give us some idea about the cool roof. It just means compared to the traditional convectional roof, usually those convection roofs have a relatively small albedo. Basically they reflect less radiation. But the cool roof, the idea is that they're going to try to have a higher albedo. They're going to reflect more radiation, and then the surface will receive less radiation. That's a kind of introduce a cooling. This is one of the cooling strategies in the cities. In the model, we can easily change the roof's properties. For example, we can easily change something called albedo. That's something called solar reflectance. That's from 20% to 80%. And then we do simulation. We compare the result, and then it clearly shows us actually the cool roof does play an important role in cooling down the surface air temperature, and also most importantly, it cool down the surface skin temperature. This is some kind of the modeling stuff we can easily achieve, but in reality, it's really hard, right? We replace all the roofs with the cool roofs, but somehow, using modeling in numerical studies, we are able to show people, yes, that's a kind of an efficient way to trying to reduce the heat stress in the cities.
All right, sounds like an engineering challenge as well.
Relevant.
All right, we're up on our last 10 minutes. So Jody Jackson Jr., I promised I would show your question, and here's the part where we're going to talk about climate change communication. Let's see what Jody had to say. Jody Jackson says, I'm hearing the climate scientists mention the challenge of communicating the data, record, research, and science with each other, as well as the public. How can policymakers, journalists, and scientists better communicate the climate message to the public, considering that it's a challenge for the climate experts? Yeah, AY, I guess I want to start off with you. You probably know more about climate communication than all of us put together. Because that's like your job.
Kind of, sort of. I mean,
Yeah,
I was just gonna say it's
yeah.
dense. Like, I was gonna say, like, first of all, nothing about this stuff is cool. To be honest, like, it's cool, but it's not. Like, you know what I'm saying,
Mhm.
guys? Like, it's not dope, right? Like, and like, for instance, I didn't know what the 17 SDGs were before I went to Climate Week and like met Al Gore. And even my line to him, because I still didn't know nothing about half this stuff, was, "Yo, man, what you're doing is really dope." Because he was saying a lot of dope, cool stuff, and I like looked behind him, but his stage was powered by fossil fuels. So mind you, I'm a dude that's been, I power all my shows with renewable energy. So I was like, you should be powered by battery tour, today. But like, I say that to say, it's like, he said a whole lot of stuff, and I never really got it, and I don't think most people do. Like, it just sounds whack. Like, no, whack in the sense of like, you know what I'm saying? Like the average. So like, I think the best way is like, how do you make it cool? How do you make it dope? Well, what do people care about? Well, they care about TikTok. Oh, well, she listens to Beyonce. Oh, this guy really cares about Eminem. So I mean, at least my idea, the solution is to bring it to people in a more pop culture dope way, and make
You want to
it
meet
kind
people
of
where
cool.
they are.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, my idea, I'm doing this crazy project called the Global Goals, and so I'm doing an album, 17 songs, one song for each goal, and I'm collaborating with the biggest artists and people in the world, right, on this project, kind of like Michael Jackson's "We Are the World," right? So one of the songs I have that you hear in the background is with a band called The Head and the Heart, which a lot of people care about. I'm also talking with Billie Eilish. I'm also about to, pull in Stevie Wonder and Katy Perry and all these, right? These are people that people care about, and using their voice to power the change by talking about it, even getting people to make one small change, right? Like if Billie Eilish was to say, which is why we're asking her, power this with your voice, but with an action. If Billie Eilish was to say, hey, all my tours are going to be sustainable, or I'm going to use this kind of plastic or hemp T-shirts or whatever, that's just that inch that gets into the minds and souls of another 20 million people, right? So I think we just got to keep leaning on the new generation and working together with the new and older generation, and both languages of the Harvard guys and the data guys, but also working with the people that can communicate and keep work together on pushing it out more, right? Maybe use different ways. That's all. I could talk about this all day, but
this is kind of a question and comment for everybody, but it seems like the more and more people are starting to understand climate change every day, and that's a good thing. But there's also a sense of climate nihilism, I think, from a lot of people. Like, oh, it's happening, but there's nothing we can do about it. What's the good news? How can we act right now? What's the message do we share with people about the future? How does this, how can we fight climate change?
Well, you just had to ask us an impossible question, right? So I want to, before I get to that though, I wanted to go back to something that AY said, and just to extend a little bit. I think climate and climate change has become a taboo subject. And in many cases, it's something that you don't want to talk about. It's gotten polarized. People are entrenched. And I think, like you said, meeting people where they are is really important. So one of the things that we try to think about and try to do is, how are you talking about climate, or are you talking about resiliency? Because sometimes that's an easier conversation to have. It's the same conversation, but it's an easier conversation to have. Or you talk about, how do we make our lives better? What's hard for you right now, and how can we make our lives better? Again, same conversation, but just different framing and different words, and trying to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. Also trying to think about the fact that climate change is not just a conversation for scientists to have. It's a conversation for humanists to have. It's a conversation for social scientists to have. It's a conversation for activists to have. It's a conversation for teenagers and elementary school kids to have. And to think about, how does climate change, and how do discussions about climate and resilience and adaptation, how do those thread through everything we do? And if we're thinking about in terms of our classes, how do we talk, why should we think about climate change in an English class? There's lots of really good reasons, right? If we think about how do humans interact with one another and adapt to each other. So I just wanted to kind of say, I think it's important to talk about it and to figure out what conversational toolkit might be appropriate or easiest for you to use, or appropriate or easiest for the people that you're talking with to receive or to use as well. So I wanted to kind of add that.
So well said.
But what can we do? So I think there's, it can get overwhelming. What can I do? I can't do anything, right? But there are small things that we can certainly do as individuals, and the choices that we make in terms of the choices that we make on, the day-to-day. How do we get from place A to place B, right? Do you need to drive or can you walk? How efficient is your home? So those are some of those kinds of things that you can think about. What choice can I make with respect to this that I'm doing today? But candidly, there are also really big structural and policy choices and decisions. And so I think voting is really important. What is happening at your state and national level? Who do you agree with? Who's thinking about how they can see making our world more resilient and a more resilient, livable place? And who is kind of thinking about those and vote for them, work for them, help advocate for them? Because it's both what we do at home, but that's not enough. It's also thinking about our systems and the systems that we've designed and the systems that we live within, and how do we help affect change on that systemic level.
Jenny, I want to get to you for some of the final questions. We have just about 5 minutes left, but I want to honor some of these questions that we're getting on Facebook. This one comes from Chloe Wells. Hi, Chloe Wells. Nice to meet you. In the age of information, influencers are essential to filter knowledge, and that's why we look up to them so much. They should be using their platform for things that matter. This seems like it's directed at you, AY. I don't know why. But
Chloe, no one can be perfect, but every little thing counts.
Yeah.
So first of all, can I say two things? I want to piggyback on what you were just saying, ma'am. You're so right on so many levels. Let me bounce over it. Influencers, yes. I mean, what he's talking about is like, yes. I mean, obviously, influencers, they have a lot of followers and they make things cool, right? I mean, this is why influencers sometimes get paid to influence. Oh, this bottle, it tastes really good. I drink it, and so they influence people. They have to be involved, and that's what I'm saying is that we've got to find ways to make it a mainstream thing, but where it's engaging and that people can care about it, even if it's through who they care about, right? So I mean, I totally agree with that. I was gonna say something and lost the train of thought, but I totally agree with that statement. So
Anyway, I have a follow-up for you. I'm kind of curious because we're talking about these changes, and you actually bring these changes to people and say, power your concerts with this energy. Like, how do you sort of bring that enthusiasm and say like, it can be done, do it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that, because I mean, this goes to the second problem, right? Of like, I've always been a doer, and I see a world of people that talk, but they're not necessarily doing, or maybe they don't know how. So some of it too is like, yeah, a whole bunch of people want to take action, but they go, oh, well, I'm not Apple, I'm not Amazon, I can't make a big difference. But I think the key is understanding that a collective movement is what makes the difference, right? Like, it's like, oh, if everyone's turning off their lights and practicing energy efficiency, then it's huge. Or and here's the thing, don't just take an action, because we need to obviously clearly define what the actions are you can take, right? Oh, well, I'm going to sell my gas car and I'm only going to buy electric vehicles. That's a huge step for an individual to take, right? Like a whole bunch of those and we're all electric vehicle cars. So I think that there needs to be more definition in the action. Empower people to understand that little change is way bigger than you think, because it's part of the collective, right? And then, of course, I'm all about be about it. Like, it's crazy. I went to some climate thing in Climate Week, and I mean, I love what Jaden Smith does, Will Smith's son. It was great. He got on stage. Everybody was hyped because I guess he cares about water. He has a water business, right? And then, gets to stage, says something about sustainability. Oh, we got to fight, climate or whatever. And then starts rapping about and singing about a song with his lyrics were like, girls butt, da, da, right? And it's like, that doesn't line up with the man. Why is he on stage? What if, right? Like, what if we could not only just talk about it, which is why when I shook Al Gore's hand, which Al Gore is great. Like, I mean, he's a great dude. But it's like, okay, you're saying a lot of stuff, but what if your stage was powered by renewable energy and you weren't destroying it, right? What if the artist could actually make a song about gender equality or racial inequality or no pot or one of the 17 SDGs and, perform like, so it's just, and sometimes you need someone to come in, a leader or person or something crazy to happen, like a virus, for people to just see the change right in front of them. Sometimes you need that.
Yeah. So you need people to put money where their mouth is. We just have a minute or two remaining. We're a little bit over time. We'll get to the after party in a minute. But I think one last question, and I want to get Pat and Doug in on this. Our director, Rachel Owen at the Most Policy Initiative, explains to me that you two have extensive experience in communicating climate change. Last question is, what are some of your guys' strategies?
Sometimes I think Pat has a harder job than I do when it comes to this. I get invited to a lot of platforms similar to this, but with various sectors, right? So it could be agriculture. I think it's because of you, Pat. I was invited last year. My last trip that I could take as a non-COVID person was to St. Louis to talk to the berry community, right? The berry community, these guys grow raspberries and blueberries and great stuff, right? All this great stuff. What do they want to hear? Well, they want to hear what's happening soon, like in the next season or two. That's all important to them because they're growers. They also want to hear what the trends are and what the shape of things to come is the way I often say it. And we don't have to talk about climate change. We can just talk about how things are changing, right? So a lot of what I'm saying here is and I think Beth alluded to it, and maybe AY did too, in terms of shaping your message to your audience and what they care about and their experience, right? So in other words, you don't take a bat to every meeting you go to, all right? You don't hit people over the head all the time. They can get plenty of that elsewhere if you want. So, and I'm not the best speaker, as you can tell, but I have learned that much, that you shape it to their local, regional, sector need in terms of how to communicate. And I think that's what both Beth and AY were saying, almost exactly.
Localism.
All right. I think that we should probably wrap it up. We're over time. I said we were going to try to keep it to an hour. We're like at an hour and 5 minutes. I said we were going to have a Zoom happy hour after party after this. So boom, that is going out into the chat. I might regret this, putting this out into the world, letting anybody come in. But if you didn't sign up before, there's the link. Join my Zoom room, and hopefully if you all are able to join, great. If you're not, hey, I understand everybody's zoomed out. It's Friday afternoon. Everybody wants to have a beer that's not in front of the computer. So thank you, Doug, Pat, Fengpeng, Beth, AY. You guys are awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
All
Put
right.
on AY's album and get into the weekend.
I had your music running in the background today when I was doing some work.
That's so awesome. Hey,
Great.
save the planet. Peace out.
Thanks all.
Yeah, it is catchy. I have had it on repeat. Okay.
Oh, my
all
kids
right.
have teenagers. They liked it too.
All right. Hey, I'll see y'all in a little bit if you can make it. Otherwise, catch you later.